2 years have seen the miraculous birth and growth of the rescue movement. By the middle of 1990, there have been over 40,000 arrests as people have sought to save children from being killed by abortion and their mothers from being exploited. Hundreds of babies have been saved from death as a result of this courageous stand. Among those arrested, often leading the way, have been hundreds of clergy. This explosion of Christian activism is unprecedented in American history. But this wave of activism has come with a cost. Besides being arrested and often jailed in one city after another, nonviolent, peaceful praying rescuers are being met with police brutality. Brutality on a scale that has not been seen in the United States for over 20 years. Injuries have ranged from having mace sprayed in the face of rescuers, including a 2-year-old baby, broken bones, the near death of at least 3 grown men, and pregnant women losing their babies in miscarriage. However, this brutality has been all but ignored by the national media. That in itself is a disgrace and an outrage. The brutality you are about to see is fortunately not in every city. Much of the footage you will see was shot by pro-lifers on the scene with home video cameras. The brutality began in Atlanta, Georgia in October of 1988, and these tactics were soon exported to other cities such as Los Angeles. 800 praying pro-lifers were descended on by nearly 500 police, many on horses and many wearing riot gear. All day long, the police systematically brutalized people, resulting in many injuries, including broken bones. The police were astounded at how much pain the rescuers were able to endure. In a sworn statement, Captain Patrick E. McKinley wrote, "Pain for many of the demonstrators is a catharsis for past failure to take action against abortion. Therefore, the demonstrators have an unusual capacity to withstand pain. With this unique ability to withstand pain comes the possibility of injury, since a greater degree of pain is required to induce compliance by the arrestee." Frustrated with the courage and stamina of the rescuers, the LAPD decided to increase the pain. On June 10, 1989, they used nunchucks on the rescuers. This is an illegal martial arts weapon, and merely possessing one in California is a felony. To be attacked with one is assault with a deadly weapon. Never before in the history of America have nunchucks been used on non-violent protesters. This is the gruesome sight of what happened. The police, in unprovoked cruelty, wrapped the nunchucks around Michael Hausman's arm and broke it. When lawyers went to federal Judge Tashima to request he order the police to cease using them, he denied the request, saying in so many words that pro-lifers could not prove they were in any danger.
I can't tell you what it's like to be lying on the ground with police officers on top of you, using all sorts of torture holds to make you walk. You can't walk even if you wanted to walk, and their sole intent is to torture you. And then listening to the screams of the people as somebody gets a bloody nose. And as I would look up, there are these 2 deep rows of police officers. Beyond them, standing on cars and on a wall, were just throngs of pro-death people screaming for our blood. And if somebody got a bloody nose, they'd scream even louder and chanting blasphemous chants.
I offered no resistance whatsoever, and they brought me to the middle of the street and threw me down into the asphalt. I had 1 officer on each hand. I had an officer holding a foot and twisting my ankle. I had another officer standing on my back and doing knee drops into my back.
I mean, they could pick you up by all 4 limbs and walk you away, or they could just simply drag you by 2 arms or 2 legs, or they could carry you away on stretchers, or, you know, any number of things. But it just seems very excessive, and it seems like they're, you know, determined to do that because they don't want us in their town. But, you know, we can't let that stop us.
A few weeks after this treatment I received at the hands of the LAPD, I miscarried my 9th child, and I have no history of miscarriage, and the medical opinion I have is that the probable cause was the excessive and violent use of nunchucks and the plastic straps for an excessively long time. But those things are the probable cause of the miscarriage of my child.
And the Fourth Amendment says that no citizen of the United States shall be subject to unreasonable search or seizure. It has been a right that has protected us. This right is being watered down at this time to the point of uselessness to peaceful, nonviolent demonstrators who happen to bring their social reform to the city of Los Angeles.
On June 17, 1989, rescuers arrived at the Summit Women's Center in West Hartford, Connecticut at about 8 o'clock in the morning and began entering the abortuary to prevent children from being killed. The police arrived, removed their name tags, badges, and began their cruelty. They quickly arrested 4 members of the media, seizing and destroying notes, video film, and camera film. They wanted no evidence of their brutality.
When the police arrived and they began to make preparations to make arrests, they brought in city buses and they brought them up to the doors, and they brought a patrol car in, and all the policemen went to the back of the patrol car and they all threw their identifications and their badges into the trunk and took out riot sticks, which was totally unprofessional behavior. When you bring out riot sticks, it's usually because you expect to see some serious opposition, so you put on helmets and you put on face masks and you carry shields. These policemen were bareheaded because they knew they weren't going to get any resistance from the other side.
With excruciating pain, I think I have to tell you that. It was, we've been in Atlanta and others, and you know, they got rough, but we expected that because that's a consequence of what we do, you know. But here it was calculated torture, and the policemen were enjoying the pain. They laughed at the people screaming, and all of us screaming, all grown men, mature men. And you couldn't help but scream. What happened was when the 2 nightsticks squeezed on the wrist, they cut off the nerve ends and the flow of blood, and your hands swelled up to almost twice the size, and they turned black. So, and the constant movement of that, the scissor effects, the 2 vices on your wrist, was just excruciating.
They immediately started to hyperflex my hands so far that my hands touched my wrists, and they carried me like that, and I heard everything crack and everything go, and I knew at that point that something had been broken. It didn't matter whether you were a woman, a man, an old person. It didn't matter what your age, sex, or anything, that they were just there. They were going to brutalize everybody. And I think probably to the women more particularly that they were very angry that they couldn't get a young woman like myself to walk. And I could tell that it was a pride issue.
They tell me I stopped breathing for in excess of 2 minutes, and Father Westland couldn't find a pulse for in excess of 1 minute. I believe there were some 18 rescuers, all male, up in the cell, and cell area up there. It's in a semicircle. It's monitored by one-way video cameras and 2-way audio, and they all called for doctors. I am also led to believe that there are 2 EMTs on call at the police station at all times. When I say on call, I mean downstairs on the 1st floor. No one responded. Not by coming, not by speaking. No one responded at all. Father Westland administered CPR, and by the grace of God, my heart started beating again.
The only thing a police officer has to back him up in the use of force is he may use, under Connecticut law, that force and only that force that is necessary to achieve legitimate police objectives, legitimate law enforcement objectives. When he crosses over the line to use illegitimate force, then he himself becomes a criminal.
The most outrageous abuse to date has come from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. On March 11, 1989, 120 rescuers intervened at the Allegheny Reproductive Health Center. Because of police misconduct, all rescuers became passively limp through the whole arrest and booking procedure. The women were separated from the men, and taken to the Allegheny County Jail. Once in the custody of the county jail guards, unbelievable things took place. Rosanna Weissert is the attorney of record for those women.
They were verbally abused by the officers, not just profanity, but comments on the size of their breasts and their condition and what they were going to do with them. They were variously threatened with rape by the guards, with sodomy, with being thrown naked into the prison cells. The women told me that they could actually hear the prisoners. They couldn't tell what they were saying, but they were hooting and howling. And one woman who's a grandmother, she has 3 children who have served in the service, and can't believe that this happened to her. She was threatened with rape by the guards if she didn't walk up the stairs. They were in mortal fear.
As I noticed when I was being dragged in, there were men in a holding pen. They were prisoners. They were in a holding pen, and they could see this all happening. Us being dragged in and being dragged up the steps. And when I was being dragged to get my mugshot taken, they had pulled my blouse over my head, so my whole breast was exposed.
As we were being drugged up, the warden, Kosakovich, was kicking a few of the women. One guard picked me up by my bra, and he drugged me up the stairs, and by that, I was totally exposed, and I couldn't, pull them down because my hands were behind my back. So they drugged me up 5 flights of stairs by my bra.
There was one girl that was a couple beds over, and she was unconscious. And she came up before me, so I didn't know what happened to her, but she was passed out, and we kept going over trying to bring her to. We thought if she'd hear a familiar voice or something. And they wouldn't let us comfort her, they wouldn't let us go near her. They kept telling us, get back on your beds, and it was just like a nightmare.
The atrocities in Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, West Hartford, and other cities have prompted the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights to ask the FBI and the Justice Department to begin an investigation into various law enforcement agencies. William Allen is the guiding force behind these actions.
We have not to this point seen very much in the way of remorse from municipal officials about the treatment rescuers have received. When they have spoken at all, they have seemed rather to condemn the rescuers and to excuse the policemen than to speak regretfully about some of the violent incidents that we have witnessed. One of the gifts to America from the civil rights movement, from the trials, the struggles, and the sufferings of black people, has been the consensus that nonviolent social protest is acceptable. That was not established until the civil rights movement. Selma, Alabama is a high point in that struggle, and people paid dearly to win that price. And I can understand, I suppose, where those who went through the trials of the 1960s somehow would come to think that they were their own trials, and perhaps maybe they are the only ones who should profit by it. But that's a mistake. It's a great mistake. What was won in the struggle for black rights was a gift to the United States, not a gift just to black people. And this consensus that protects nonviolent social protest must be respected today, because we're going to need it again. It's not going to end here.
Actions against pro-life rescuers crossed sacred boundaries on June 11, 1989, when police invaded a Sunday worship service at New Creation Community Church in Chesapeake, Virginia, for the purpose of serving notices to pro-life church members named in a $1.3 million lawsuit by the Hillcrest Abortion Clinic.
We actually recognized that there would come a day when we might face a circumstance such as this. I never thought it would happen as it has happened, police coming into a service and stopping it. Never thought anything like that could happen in our land. It has. On the one hand, I'm shocked by it. On the other hand, I'm not.
According to the lawsuit filed by the church, armed police officers violated 3 constitutional amendments and 6 Virginia laws when they blocked the church driveway with police squad cars, detained and demanded identification from individuals outside the church building, recorded license plates of vehicles in the church parking lot to obtain the owners' names, detained an individual from entering a prayer room inside the church building, forced worshipers to file through a checkpoint as they left the church building, and used physical restraint and intimidation tactics to compel church members to identify themselves.
I feel that we as a church have the responsibility to hold our city officials, to hold our government officials accountable. On the one hand, I certainly want to minister in the kindness of Christ. Yet on the other hand, there's such a responsibility for us to be like Christ, even in holding people accountable. justice is necessary. God is merciful, but yet he's just. As the scripture says, well, I believe God's looking for the church today to seek justice, to uphold justice, and I feel a responsibility now as a result of what occurred Sunday to ensure that justice is realized in this matter, justice for the church.
Injustice has been found not only in the streets with police or with prison guards, but also in courts with judges and prosecutors. Sentences and rulings have been handed down that are truly tyrannical. Judges have imposed huge fines or harsh jail sentences to good, decent citizens whose only crime was that they were trying to stop murder. Huge lawsuits have been filed to harass and intimidate rescuers. Abortuaries and city governments have used RICO statutes, which were designed for racketeers and mobsters against pro-lifers.
It's obscene, many of the sentences that they give us. In Atlanta, talking about $2,000 fines and 2 years in jail for a misdemeanor for sitting out in front of a door. Where else would you see somebody else sitting in front of a door and getting 2 years in jail to block a door? It's obscene.
One of the frequent recipients of courtroom injustice is Randall Terry, the founder of Operation Rescue. On October 5, 1989, he was sentenced to a $1,000 fine and 2 years banishment from Atlanta for his part in the rescue mission on July 19, 1988, during the Democratic National Convention. When he told the judge that he could not in good conscience pay the fine, the judge sentenced him to 2 years in prison. This interview was taken while he was jailed in a prison work camp.
These judges that are doing this to pro-lifers and that are suing us and just, they're being tyrants, they are criminals. They are criminals. We have to remember that judges in Germany were tried as criminals after the Holocaust for their part in the Holocaust. And these judges are bringing criminal acts against people.
Well, it's part of a pattern of local jurisdictions throwing the books at rescuers.